Very warm welcome to you as you join us on today's episode of Tax Matters. My name is Olumuyiwa Matuloko. Barika de Salah to all our Muslim compatriots all over the country. We thank Almighty Allah that He has found us worthy to witness this occasion. On this episode of Tax Matters, it will be feedback time once again. And as you know, feedback has been designed to give you your voice, to give the tax-paying public a voice. Not necessarily in terms of vox pop, that is street interviews, but from time to time, question and answer sessions arising from public fora organized by the Federal Revenue Service. And this kind of opportunity presented itself once again in Kano on Friday, the 21st of October, at the Stakeholder Summit organized for taxpayers and their representatives in the Northwest region of the country. That is what we're going to bring to you today on Tax Matters. But before we go on, this dampener of some sorts. On the evening of Wednesday, the 26th of October 2011, the building housing the National Secretariat of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, CITN, located in Maryland, Lagos, collapsed. We are happy to inform you, however, that no life was lost. But the loss was nonetheless monumental. Office equipment, furniture and fittings, and more importantly, records, membership records, examination records, all kinds of records. Not much could be salvaged in the few minutes available for evacuation before the building came down at 6 p.m. on that evening. Sympathizers have been pouring into the secretariat, to the former secretariat, if you like, members of sister professional bodies, council members of the CITN, members, and the general public. We at Tax Matters commiserate with the council and entire membership of the CITN on this monumental loss. Welcome back. The program is Tax Matters, and now to the story of the Stakeholder Summit organized for taxpayers and their representatives in Kano State on Friday, the 21st of October 2011. The full complement of the FRS management, led by the executive chairman herself, were in attendance. Coordinating directors, regional coordinators, and tax controllers, revenue officials from State Boards of Internal Revenue in the Northwest region, officials of the Ministry of Finance, Corporate Affairs Commission, Central Bank of Nigeria, representatives of state ministries, departments and agencies, and local governments, and in fact, bankers. Before the arrival of the executive chairman, who had an early morning engagement with the governor of the state, Governor Rabiu Kwankwaso, Alhaji Kabiru Mashi, coordinating director, support services group at the FRS, held forth for the executive chairman. The coordinating director, tax operation group at the FRS, Mr. S.S. Ogungbeson, fired the first salvo by seizing the opportunity to talk once again about full implementation of self-assessment regime.
We started off self-assessment system in 1991. That's about 20 years ago now. To some of our taxpayers and consultants, they feel self-assessment is when a taxpayer assesses himself and the job is done. But we have since realized that self-assessment goes beyond the taxpayer just voluntarily assessing himself and make payment to government. It comes with some condition. And these conditions are that you will file your return and pay the taxes due on or before the due date. Most countries have a common due date, a date by which all accounts and payment must be made. That's why you hear that in the UK, when it is 31st of March, every year, everyone is rushing to make sure they file their returns and make their payments. If you don't, God help you in such jurisdiction. But for us in Nigeria, we have as many as 10 due dates. It's all a function of when your accounting date is determined. We have a lot of taxpayers, clustering around June ending or 31st December. Of course, there are some, distribution to other months, but that's where we have the cluster. And that's why every year you find out that the collection in the month of June, July is usually very high, hyper high. What that means is the law allows you as a taxpayer to file your returns not later than 6 months after the end of your company's accounting date. So if your accounting date is December 31st, the law allows you 6 months period to sort out all the legalistics or whatever and make sure that you file that return by June of the succeeding year. That's what we have lived with all these years. But then the aspect of payment is one thing to file your return. The other is paying the taxes due. In our law, it will appear that we have ignorantly or innocently just felt that the payment could then come after account had been submitted, because that's the way the law had been structured. So for us then, we thought, once you submit your account and we do not have to assess you, you have complied with the self-assessment law. We're now saying we will develop a regulation, and that regulation will specify from what time you can make your instrumental payment to ensure that it does not extend beyond the due date. It's the choice of a taxpayer. You may pay in one lump sum and you may want to pay installmentally. But the bottom line is no payment will be allowed to be made after the due date.
Full implementation of the self-assessment system. Now to the question and answer session. This first gentleman represented the Central Bank of Nigeria at the forum. He spoke on behalf of other ministries, departments, and agencies that act as collecting agents for the Federal Revenue Service for withholding tax and value-added tax.
Whose responsibility is it? We are tax collectors on behalf of FIRS. And when our suppliers supply us, we deduct the withholding tax and remit it to you through the deposit money banks. We take the schedule to both the deposit money banks and their office in Kano, the large tax office. I don't know, you are supposed to be field officers. I have never seen any of your staff. It is now, I have to send my staff to go and collect these credit notes on behalf of the taxpayers. But right now, I've collected some for this year, but those for 2010, we are still battling. My staff will have to leave his office, his schedule. He will be visiting that office several times in a day. Sometimes, in fact, the staff are getting paid off. So I just want to know, whose responsibility is it? Is it my duty to come to Federal Inland Revenue and collect those tax credit cards, or it is the responsibility of your office to bring it to my office so that I forward it to the taxpayers? If it is my responsibility to come, I think you should make it easier for me so that whenever I come, as long as I have evidence that those taxes were paid, I think those credit tax should be ready so that I don't have to be visiting your office trying to become even a staff of Federal Inland Revenue Service.
The second point is still on the self-assessment. You know, when you define that the due date, as we are looking at it, will be the end of the first 6 months from the date of the account year of the respective companies. And I will have believed that if a company is applying or rely on you that to provide a platform for them to pay their taxes on instrumental basis, it should actually stem from that date, from the due date. So not as if, okay, your year end 31st December, so your instrumental payment is assumed to have started from that day. It's supposed to be looking at it from 30th June, where the due date is supposed to have come up.
My question is still on my capacity as tax consultant. At the beginning of my business transaction with Federal Inland Revenue Service, I've been asked to register, not for TIN now as a taxpayer, but as a consultant, which warranted production of practicing license, registration with Corporate Affairs Commission, and other relevant documents. And after that, every office of the Federal Inland Revenue, the ITOs that we go, they will still demand to cite the originals of those documents and to start all over as if it is a different entity entirely. My question or probably suggestion is this: can the Federal Inland Revenue probably centralize or create a database of the registered consultants so that you don't have to register at every ITO moving about with your original credentials?
At this juncture, the executive chairman of the FRS joined the forum and made this intervention.
I just caught into the last presentation that was being made, and I think with that I clearly understand that you all know why we're here, basically to see ways in which we can support you better. I think I caught a recommendation that rather than have the taxpayer move from one office to the other, registering consultants, we should think of having a central portal where all consultants are registered accordingly. And I actually think that's an excellent idea. And I think truly it's something we need to pick up. And what that does, it also reduces, it creates a one-stop shop, so to speak, for the consultants. And I think we'll look into that.
Speaking much later, the executive chairman had something else to say about the role of tax consultants in the scheme of things.
On the issue of the role of consultant, and I think, again, I've heard some very valid points which I hope are being noted, and we really need to pull together and follow up on all these issues. And for there to be clarity, because tied to the earlier observation of a register of tax consultants, I think we need to really sit down and be clear on how can the tax consultant assist in the self-assessment process. How can the tax consultant assist in the team, but do so at a low cost? Because again, part of the real challenge that the taxpayer has is the cost of the tax consultant. In fact, one thought that one is thinking about is how to expand this tax consultant base and perhaps create some kind of training, and in that process we may also create jobs for people who will just be taught how to file returns, how to register TIN. So they become aids to the taxpayer without having to depend on FRS. And they do it at a very minimal fee. Not FRS, but we also owe the taxpayer to provide at no fee certain services. So that way we do not overburden the taxpayer with jobs that at the end of the day it becomes a distraction to their paying their taxes because they cannot really afford to. So we really need to think around this role of the consultant, how they can assist, and also address this issue of the tax officer in the federal and in the state being a bottleneck in the process of proper tax payments. And I've said this at different fora. If you know of such individuals, please feel free to report them to the executive chairman of the FRS. My email, my phone number is all on the website. If you check the FRS website, I can easily be contacted. You have a problem, you're finding that the officers themselves are the bottlenecks to proper returns file. Let us know, give us their names, tell us their offices. Because such issues are actually not being tolerated. Again, we discussed that yesterday. So you need to help us and partner with us to really create a transparent tax system. I don't know whether we've also spoken about the integrated tax admin system we're also putting in place, which also minimizes individual interface and creates a lot more of an automated environment that makes it easier for the taxpayer. So these are some of the things that we're doing to make it easier for the taxpayer to pay their taxes and to pay it properly.
In response to the inquiry about whose duty it is to forward withholding tax credit notes to beneficiaries,
we wish to respond to what the the taxpayer said, as I came into the office, all the outstanding credit notes, we batched them and distributed them. We've been distributing them to all the taxpayers. But his case, I think, the backlog of 2009 and 2010 that were not printed, or I don't know which of the credit notes he's talking about, because the ones that we had, the ones that were printed, are all distributed to the various taxpayers. The filing debt and arrears enforcement unit is set, and for everyone, every batch of credit notes that are printed, they are taking them office by office to distribute to the owners.
Still on self-assessment and the requirement that payment should be made on due date alongside with filing of returns?
The track now is you will file your returns not later than the due date, but payment must also be made along with it. So for 18 years, corporate entities and consultants have lived with the fact that the payment will commence after due date. We're not saying, but that's a wrong principle, wrongly interpreted. How can we correct it now? Is to drum it into the ears of every taxpayer in Nigeria that, sorry, you have not moved your payment along with the filing requirement, but now let's harmonize the two. But you're still going to be entitled to instrumental payment. And I say to you, but you know you have a right to begin to make instrumental payment from the beginning of every year. We're talking about financial year. The financial year starts January to December. Government needs money. Okay. The money you will have paid me, or you will be required to pay me by June ending, begin to make the payment from January. I will allow the instrumental payment. And you don't need to even apply to any tax office to give you approval. It's now your right. It's your right. Start making instrumental payment from February, March, April, May. But make sure that by the time you are filing return in June, it's coming with the last installment.
The Federal Inland Revenue Service introduces the tax card to make all tax payment easy for you. Just follow these 7 easy steps. Obtain your taxpayer identification number, TIN, for free at any FIRS office. Get your tax card from your bank. Log on to www.firsonline.com. Then register to obtain a password and access the payment process pages. Fill your TIN number, tax type you're paying, amount payable, and period of payment. Confirm the entries on your transaction. Then print your e-ticket and present at any FIRS office as an evidence of tax paid. It's that simple. For more information, visit www.firs.gov.ng or any FIRS office close to you. FIRS. It pays to pay your tax.
Welcome back. What we are serving you today is the proceedings of the Stakeholder Summit that was held in Kano State on Friday, the 21st of October, 2011. Now to more questions and answers.
My question, sir, is going to about concerning TIN number. I'm dealing with local contractors. Most of the time, if I make a payment, I deduct the tax, but I don't have the TIN number to pay that withholding tax I deducted from the contractor. What I'm going to ask is there any way I will use to pay that amount when I deducted from the contractors?
The case of Subeb, the gentleman who asked the question now, is that the Jigawa state government has provided that before any contract is issued, each contractor must have been registered by Federal Inland Revenue Service. But because of the nature of politics, some small contractors that have not been registered usually come and they are issued contracts. So in that case, when they give us a list of their payments for withholding tax and they do not have TIN, what we usually tell them is that we cannot generate TIN off head with just name. So we now ask them to go back and ask their contractors to provide their details like address, registration from CAC. We need those details to generate TIN. Whenever they don't give us those details, we liaise with Malik or any person from the headquarters
we have a particular taxpayer identification number, which we post it as unposted payment. That is after we give them a grace period and they don't bring their tin.
We thank you for the opportunity given to interact with you. So our only concern is regarding the tax clearance certificates. The speed in which we get a query from the FIRS after filing the returns, the tax clearance certificate doesn't reach us the same speed, sir. Tax clearance certificate is just not an acknowledgement to a company. It serves as a supporting document for many of the approvals we have to get. In certain issues, they say, when we say why there is a delay, they say we have raised some queries, we have not received some documents. I think basically tax clearance certificate is as long as we have paid our taxes in time, there is no default. It has nothing to do with a query which has not been answered properly. And in spite of that, what I'm coming to say is our company, we have been answering every query. We are having a very good track record. And when, it has been passed through our auditors, basically tax, we don't directly interact for tax clearance certificate. And unnecessarily, sometimes we have been, when we file still why it is getting delayed, they say, okay, everything is gone through, but the person on seat is gone on leave, he'll be in a month's leave. But subordination to others from whom it's not our responsibility. A taxpayer should not be harassed for the, delayed in such cases.
There was a quick response to the complaint of the gentleman from the tax controller of the FIRS Integrated Tax Office on Zaria Road in Kano.
If there's any reason why we don't issue tax clearance, we will not issue tax clearance to a given taxpayer. We normally communicate within that given 2 weeks. So I don't know why the problem arose.
I'll personally monitor and ensure that you get prompt response. If there's any reason why it's not been processed by now, you need to know in written form. But if they've responded to the taxpayer, the consultant, he didn't give you a copy of that letter, then he's trying to be mischievous. But like I explained to you earlier on, you need to insist to see the tax controller. He is the ambassador of the FIRS in this jurisdiction. See him. When you engage with him and you are still not satisfied, there's another higher level, and that's the regional coordinator. Insist that they give you his number, his email or telephone number, and talk to him. When all those avenues fail, you can then get back to headquarters. But let me make an explanation on the volume of queries you say they do normally raise and insist. You file a self-assessment yourself, and the inspector or the officer has examined their return, and he sees that, no, you need to give some explanation of some of the expenses you have incurred. He reminds you after 3 months to provide answer. No answer came from your consultant. He sends a reminder another 3 months. No response. And that's the situation before you now apply for tax clearance certificate. He's in quandary how to dispose of such a case. Because if you've given him prompt response, he will know whether to drop that case or raise an additional assessment on you. If he wants to use his judgment, he says, okay, I'll give you a restricted TCC for just 1 month to enable you treat those issues and resolve them amicably. Where additional assessment will arise, he will raise it. And where he doesn't need to go further, he drops it. But we ourselves at the headquarters are discouraging this issuance of restricted tax clearance certificate. Why do you want to restrict? If he needs to give you full 12 months, let him give you. If he's not going to give you, he tells you why he will not give you, that will encourage you to quickly do what he has asked you to do. But you see, with the self-assessment system, we're doing better than those old practices. We will trust that the returns you've given us are correct. We will do risk analysis on the returns. It's in sequence. You submit return, we do risk analysis to be sure that revenue will not be compromised in any form. And then we may decide that we need to visit you for an audit. What that says is that you won't be getting those volume of queries from the revenue anymore, because we'll be there to see the facts for ourselves. That will help you. If there's anything you're doing not doing well, you have an opportunity to learn about those things from the revenue. And in future, we believe you will not commit the same errors again.
Because of time constraints, we have to draw the curtains on today's episode of Tax Matters. It's been feedback time. And if we have in any way helped in further deepening your understanding of the workings of the Nigerian tax system, then let's do it again next week, because we will still continue. And what we'll be serving you are still the proceedings from that stakeholder summit held in Kano State. Bye for now.